Hey MSM, my name is Ethan, and excited to be able to spend a few minutes with you here tonight as I believe y'all are in home groups, and we're going to be finishing our series in the book of Jonah, ending with where Jonah ends, which is chapter 4. So go ahead and grab your Bibles. Hopefully you brought those to your home group. Jonah chapter 4, that's where we're going to end our series in the book of Jonah tonight. And as you're turning there, maybe a little pro tip is it's towards the end of the Old Testament. It's one of the prophets, and Tibble Compton's is your friend. So feel free to turn there. As you're turning there, big idea for tonight for you to be thinking about is we're going to see here in this last chapter in the book of Jonah with God's heart versus Jonah's heart, or God's heart versus our heart. So we're going to do some revealing of kind of whose heart do we have more of, God's or Jonah's, and then obviously we're going to land that Jesus is the one who can change our heart, okay? So as you're turning there, hopefully you found it. Jonah chapter 4, we're going to read the whole chapter and walk through it. But before we do, have you ever had something super small cause you to be massively frustrated? So like small thing happened, massive frustration in your own life. So for you, it could be maybe you're playing a game. I hear Clash Royale is a big thing, okay? And so you're playing a game, and before you defeat the next level, or I'm out of my depth a little bit, before you get to the next thing, your phone dies, right? You're like, right? All the progress is saved, or not saved anymore. Or you can think about like you text a friend, right? And they just take forever to text back. And so you're kind of like, I'm so frustrated, right? There was a little bit of, with Chandler, she was graciously getting me lunch, and she was like 15 minutes late than what she said, and I literally was on the ground like, I'm so tired. Anyways, okay, so I was being dramatic, okay? But think about that for a second. Something so small that causes a big frustration in your own life. Now reverse it, and it's not you, but it's someone else, and it's something big in their life. Think about the idea of how oftentimes, for me, something big in someone else's life, depending on whether I like them or not, that will change how much I care about it. So if something big happens in someone else's life, right, they don't get on the team they want, right, they get a failing grade or whatever happens, that happens to them. If I don't like them, I don't care. And that's revealing of my heart. There was this one time at camp, I think I was probably in middle school, around your age, and one day of camp, I put $5 in my pocket because we were going to hit the snack shack throughout the day at some point, but we swam at some point, we did a session at some point, and so a lot of changing clothes, moving around, get to the snack shack, check on my pockets, $5 is gone. Bummed, right? I was like, that snow cone, darn, right? But I also remember there was a guy named Chris that I did not like very much, $0, right? And I think he brought his pillow, but like it got lost in the shuffle somewhere. So like he went the whole week at camp without a pillow. Guess how much I cared about that? Because I did not like Chris. 0%, okay? And so for me, that's revealing of our heart. And what we're going to see in the book of Jonah, ending with the book of Jonah in chapter 4, is a little bit of that is who we really are. That Jonah, more often than not, is a depiction of our own heart rather than our heart being a depiction of God's heart. So let's go ahead and jump in. Hopefully you're there. Jonah chapter 4, read the first 4 verses with me. It says, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. He prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God, merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. And the Lord said, do you do well to be angry? And we're going to pause there, and we're going to see that Jonah's anger is now being depicted next to God's mercy, right? Jonah is frustrated. The word we see there is exceedingly angry, right? He's very frustrated. Why? Not because he's in this place, not because of anything else. It's because he knew that God was going to have mercy on these people, and Jonah wanted God not to have mercy. He didn't want to see God's grace in action. And actually, instead of destroying them, right? Which is what Jonah wanted to, and the reason why I think he sets up and is watching from afar, all those things. But actually, God forgave them. And this is what Jonah hates, is God's forgiveness for someone that he doesn't like. In verse 2, basically, Jonah is saying, this is why I didn't want to come here, because I knew you were too good. I knew you were too forgiving, and I didn't want to see this. I didn't want this to take place. You see, Jonah had the right orthodoxy, the right theology. He didn't have the right orthopraxy. Orthodoxy is what we believe, how we think. It's in our head. Orthopraxy is what we do with our hands. It's how that plays out into our life. Jonah knew God, but he didn't know God on the inside. And so something for you to think about, something for you to maybe push pause and reflect on as a group is, have you ever wanted someone to not get something good because you didn't think they deserved it? Because you deemed they didn't deserve that thing, you then got frustrated when something good has happened to someone that you don't like. And maybe a second question, if you have time, is why do you think that God's love stretches even to those that we struggle to like? Okay, push pause, discuss that, and then come back. All right, I hope y'all got to discuss that a little bit. Let's back up in verse 5. Look at verse 5 through 9. Jonah went out of the city, and he sat on the east of the city and made a booth for himself there. He sat under it in the shade till he should see what would become of the city. Now the Lord appointed a plan and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be a shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. So Jonah was exceedingly glad, notice that same word, because of the plant. But when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint, and he asked that he might die, and said, it is better for me to die than to live. And then God asks a question in verse 9. But God said to Jonah, do you do well to be angry for this plant? And he said, yes, I do well to be angry enough to die. And we're going to pause right there. We see a plant, we see a worm, we see the sun, and we really see Jonah's heart on display here. And God provides this word picture, this illustration for us to really, and this is mainly for Jonah, right? But we're going to see through this. But this is for us to see Jonah's real heart, and God's working on Jonah's heart to form it into what God wants Jonah's heart to be like. So God makes a plant grow up over him. He has shade. He's exceedingly glad. Notice it's the exact opposite of what this chapter started with about the plant. But then the next day, God sends a worm, the plant dies, and then this wind comes, and then Jonah is miserable. Jonah's furious again, but it's not about the city of people. It's about the plant. It's about the death of the plant. And in this moment, God is revealing Jonah's heart, trying for Jonah to see his own heart. That Jonah cares more about his personal comfort than he does the souls and the lives of 120,000 people. You see, for us, I can often care more about my comfort than the mission of God. That for me, I want shade. I don't want the sacrifice. But for us in our comfort, God is in the business of pressing our comforts into the shape of his heart for us. And so something for you to think about is this plant was this thing that grew up literally out of his life, out of his heart, to reveal his own heart, for Jonah to see that he cares more about this plant than he does 120,000 people made in the image of God. So something for you to think about. Maybe it's not a plant. Maybe you don't have something to this extreme, but do you have something small that you are giving way too much time and energy? And is that thing growing into an idol that is then casting a shadow on your empathy and sympathy for others, especially others that you don't like? Is there something small in your life that you care more about than you do the people that you don't like? What is that thing and why? Take a moment and reflect on that question. All right, lastly, we are going to end with the last two verses, in verses 10 and 11. Go ahead and read along with me. In verse 10 it says, "And the Lord said, you pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow, which came into being in a night and then perished in a night. Should I not pity Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also as much cattle?" And so we land here seeing God's compassionate heart and him explaining his heart to Jonah. Jonah's story ends with a final question, but not a final answer. And so we don't know what happened with Jonah. But the thing is that Jonah didn't answer that question, at least not that we see, but we can. We can answer God's question. If I can rephrase it, it would be for God asking us, do you care more about what he cares about or what you care about? Is our heart more like Jonah, or is it more like God? And here's the thing is, you can be honest, right? There's nothing wrong with being honest. It's okay to not be okay as long as you're being honest about it and getting help. And so admitting that you care more about what you care about than what God cares about, or you have a hard time caring for those kinds of people in your life. But for us, something that we have to see is that Jesus is what changes our heart from Jonah to God's heart. Because Jesus was the better Jonah, right? Jonah ran away from people, his enemies. Jesus ran towards his enemies, which is us, by the way. Right? Jonah wanted to die to get away from people he didn't like. Jesus gave his life so that he could be for them, so that they would have life. And so we look to Jesus to see how our heart can be different. Because Jesus came and sacrificed it all for us. That while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You and I. Right? And so a takeaway for today is to love God means learning to love who he loves and love how he loves, even those who are hard to love. I know that was a lot of love. So this week, maybe a challenge for you is to think of someone that you typically ignore, that you typically avoid, and pray for them. Pray for them. I'm not asking you to make this grand gesture, but I am saying that if you want your heart to be more like God's through Jesus and less like Jonah's, pray for those that you don't like. Pray for your quote-unquote enemies. And you can simply pray with, God, help me to have your heart. Give me your heart for fill in the blank. That's my challenge to you, is to pray for them. And it may not change tomorrow. Probably won't change tomorrow. It may not change this week. But I will say, if you continue that prayer and you're consistent with that prayer, the Lord will change your heart for that person. And you will have more of God's heart than Jonah's heart. Jonah's story ends unresolved, but your story, my story, doesn't have to. The question is, will you share God's heart? Will you step into his mission? Will you have the heart of Jonah or the heart of Jesus? Guys, I hope you'll have a good discussion about this. I hope things are revealed, hard things are revealed, but we can look to Jesus to find comfort. MSM, love you guys. Have a good night. Bye.